Everybody, thank you for coming. I am so excited to be here today. This is actually one of my favorite times of the year, SAINTCON. My name is Nathan Cooper, and I work for a company called Lucid Software. I'm their director of security. I've been in security for 15 years plus, and at Lucid for 10 plus. And fun fact, I still like both, which is actually, pretty incredible sometimes in this industry.
I'm Jake Bingham, and I'm an IT technician also at Lucid. I've been there 6 months in IT for about 8 years, and I still love Lucid, and I love that I get to work with people like Nathan.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And we are not salespeople, like you've seen our titles, and you'll be able to see that evidently when you look through our slides. We don't have marketing skills, we don't have sales skills, and we're not here to sell you on anything Lucid. We're here to talk about security and some fun stuff and how trust, authentication, and things in that general realm have failed us time and time again over the years, and how we can help organizations, like all of us, to establish better patterns and hygiene of trust and authentication. Now, what is authentication? What is authorization? I think best it's described by the Little Rascals. My kids saw this for the first time a couple days ago. And if you haven't seen it, it's worth a security perusal. So this is their display of authentication and authorization.
Go on in. You're okay. Go on in. What's the I sign? Go on in. You're okay. Wrong sign, Porky. Okay, going in. You're okay, Elmer.
So the Little Rascals had something to protect. They had their crown jewels. It was their clubhouse and the Blur, the fastest car in history. And they had a method to identify not only individuals, but whether or not those individuals should be in the clubhouse. And they use that to, tell friend from foe. We have always authenticated as people, whether we know it or not. When you see your neighbor walk out of their house, you're authenticating them and evaluating that authentication and that identity against their behavior. If it was, somebody else struggling at the door trying to get into your neighbor's house, you might wonder, what are they doing? And you would follow a different course of action in addressing that situation rather than if it was your neighbor. Now, starting in 1980s, which is a great decade to start, the birth of many wonderful things, including the internet and yours truly, we see a lot of cool things, starting with this little table in the lower left-hand corner, which, again, this is the evidence that we're not marketing people. That's our sparkly table of awesomeness. We're trying to display authentication factors that have been popular and strong for the time. So back in the day, passwords was a great authentication factor. People understood some of its weaknesses, but it was one of the strongest that we had, whereas people generally relied on industry secrets.
Nathan, can you tell me a little bit about this Kevin Mitnick fella?
Yeah, Kevin Mitnick, he's somewhat well known, right? He's downright famous. This decade actually had his first conviction for hacking systems. And his tool of choice was not some super high-tech awesomeness that he had on the command line, but it was rather a phone book. He was still a teenager, I believe, at this time, but he used a phone book to call up employees of a company, DEC, and he would ask them about their job. And he would say, hey, I'm interested in the industry. Help me understand what you do at work. We'll team off for a second on microphones, because apparently this one doesn't like me. Anyway, so he would call up one person, and then he would get a little bit of information. He would call up the next person, and he would utilize the information from the first conversation to get more information. And time again, eventually, he got to where he was able to convince people that he belonged because he had industry-specific knowledge, or that secret knowledge that people were relying on to tell friend from foe. And he ended up stealing their crown jewels because of
That's how you.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Nice. So that's a hot swappable mic. He did a great job, and he displayed some major inadequacies in people's security protocols because they weren't relying on strong authentication factors. As long as you sounded like the person and you had the industry-specific knowledge, you could convince people that you belonged. Now, if we fast forward to the next decade, the 1990s, you'll see that like industry secrets are not so popular as much, a little bit on the decline. And we see the rise, however, of a different mysterious black box called email. People didn't understand very well, but scammers would send out whereas Kevin Mitnick, he had done a very narrow, focused, and heartfelt attack against DEC. These scammers were putting out these very broad and very sloppy attacks against a huge number of people.
How complex were these attacks for the time?
So for the time, maybe they were considered complex, but people didn't understand how email worked. It's just a text file that gets sent over the internet. And you can say you are whoever you want to be. And people didn't understand that. And so they were putting trust in these industry secrets again, and also in good grammar. Because we as security professionals during this time, we were telling people, hey, look out for grammar, look out for grammar, look for bad grammar. And that's how you can authenticate these messages. But, guess what? Not all bad messages had bad grammar. Jumping forward to the next, we see more of the same. Obviously, there's these very broad attacks. They're getting a little bit better. We call that incremental improvement. But also there's a major evolution that happens in the form of a guy named Brett Johnson. Now, Brett Johnson, he was an attacker. He was a bad actor. And he had a very narrow, specialized set of skills, which was very common, right? And generally, people, when they had those narrow skills, that's the only thing that they'd focus on. And they would do really well there. Brett was like, hey, wait, I've got friends. And so he used his social skills and grabbed his hacker buddies and gathered them all together. And they all had different skills. And so they shared them with each other. They leveled up each other, and they became an organization. They called it the Shadow Crew. And it earned Brett Johnson the moniker of the original godfather of the internet.
It's a pretty sweet name.
Yes, pretty sweet name if it wasn't so malicious, right? He up-leveled his group, and it took them into a new realm of effectiveness. You'll see, however, we're also getting DKIM and some security controls getting bolted onto email and things. But it gets better, right? The next decade, we see another grand evolution. Whereas previously we had hacker organizations starting to form, now we have hacker economies and entire marketplaces forming. So a man by the name of Ross Ulbricht, or his moniker was the Dread Pirate Roberts, which again, pretty sweet name if it weren't so nefarious, right? He established a system called the Silk Road, which on the surface is super cool because you could buy and sell stuff using Bitcoin and other digital currency. However, you could, besides pizzas and chocolate, you could also buy drugs and illicit goods. You could buy weapons that were illegal in your area. You could buy people, human trafficking. Some gnarly stuff also went on there. And it allowed these individual organizations to suddenly start focusing again with their organizational talents. And you'd have these are the credit card acquirers. And they would acquire illicit cards and then package them up and then sell them to other organizations, malicious organizations, who would then validate them, who would then package them up and sell them to other people who had, money mules, who could then go purchase things with those credit cards and then transfer them into money. It created this entire economy around their skills. Also,
yeah, I'm starting to understand the organized crime aspect. What are these texts that we're seeing on the slide?
Right, thank you. So this is also social media. Everybody's racing as fast as they can to put all of their data out publicly on the internet as quickly as they can. And that has consequences, right? attackers start harvesting this data and utilizing it to add context to their attacks. Because when you add context to attack, it becomes significantly more valid appearing and a lot more effective. So these are all examples that we at Lucid actually have received from attackers purporting to be usually Dave Groh, because he's our CEO. But it's kind of funny. My favorite out of these is from Peter Rawlinson, who's the CEO of Lucid Motors, which, wonderful cars. I assume I'm not rich enough to afford one. But just goes to show you that even hackers don't always do their homework and they don't always get their code right. So 2020s, we see more of the same, just an incremental value. COVID-19 brought a general context to everybody in the world, allowing attackers to utilize that to gain attention. Because again, if you felt like you were in danger and somebody had a potential solution or a warning for you, you're way more likely to click on it, right? But again, incremental. But all that changes in 2023.
Why are we looking at a before and after photo of Tom Cruise surgery? What's going on?
Not a facial, at least not a facial in real life. This is a digital facial, where the actor on the left, who is not Tom Cruise, was able to render Tom Cruise's face with very high fidelity over his own. It took a lot of processing power and stuff, and it took time to do that, but it was amazing. It was magical for me to see that transformation. It was akin to the first time I did ARP poisoning on somebody's network, my own, of course, because that's the only place where I would do that. This is my favorite, though. And I don't know if you guys have seen Napoleon Dynamite, but it's another fantastic one, right along with Rugrats or Little Rascals. And somebody, a digital artist, went in and did something similar, but with Arnold Schwarzenegger over Uncle Rico.
The mountains. Yeah. Coach would have put me in fourth quarter. We would have been state champions, no doubt.
Are you serious?
But there's no doubt in my mind. You better believe things have been different. I'd have gone pro. Heartbeat, I'd be making millions of dollars and living in a big old mansion somewhere. You were soaking it up in a hot tub with my soulmate.
That's too good. But wow, I love Arnold in a lot of things. I want him in more. This is way funny, great use, but it's also kind of terrifying. But is it really a practical form of attack? Is this something we'll see often?
So good question, because, right, you have to render, right? So how is that going to be used in attacks? Like, it's quite entertaining, but is it practical? Now, yes, where there's a technology and where there's money, someone's going to find a way. Hackers always find a way, I think is how the saying goes. There was a finance employee at this multinational company who received a call from his manager. And his manager said, hey, or his boss, we need you to make this transfer of $20 million to these companies. And he, having done his security awareness training, was like, I'm going to need some additional validation on that, right? And so he's like, his boss is, oh, of course. Yeah, of course you do. Join this meeting. Here's a Zoom meeting, and we'll discuss it. We've got the board members. We've got everybody. You'll understand. So he joins this meeting. He recognizes the board members. He recognizes his boss and his boss's boss and all the way up. And at the end, he had all the information and all the validation that he needed. And he went and he made the 11 transfers, the wire transfers, that lost his company $25 million. And it was only a week later that he realized, after they did an investigation, that out of everybody on that call, he was the only real person. The entire call was scripted, and they had the interactions pre-rendered, ready for him to sit as a relatively passive observer and receive his instructions and lose that money.
What does this mean for us? How do we navigate this ever-changing landscape?
Well, it's rough, right? Because whereas previously the attackers had to focus in a narrow type of attack or on a narrow selection of victims, or They had to do these broad attacks that didn't have that, special touch filled with love. But now they can do both. And as an application of that, we see a recent product that has come up called Spam GPT that basically is a marketing email tool that goes out and provides these custom-made malicious attacks against all of your targets. And it can utilize things like, hey, here's their social media information. Here's information that they have about LinkedIn. Here's information we gathered from the website of the company. Here's everything that we think would be really cool for this attack. And then it pounds them and tries a different attacks, different foci in order to, compromise those individuals.
So we can have that spray and pray and surgical attacks en masse now. It seems like a little bit bleak. What can we do to stop this?
Well, good question. What we won't do is the same things that we've been doing since the beginning, which is focusing on red flags. It is a losing arms race that we cannot win. You cannot educate somebody on all of the different ways that they can be attacked, all of the different avenues of deception. It's just humanly impossible. And we can throw all the tools that we want at it, but, they're working on it too, the adversaries. So instead, on the right side, we focus on what is the right path. What are the guardrails? What is the one authorized method by which your employees can receive and peer review and authorize a $25 million wire transfer? What is the right way? And once you get those guide rails in place, you make sure your employees understand that that is the only way. So for example, at Lucid, we have put really heavy emphasis that you cannot receive a sensitive request only through SMS or by phone. And our executives were the hardest ones to get to stop doing this, right? It was like they were the largest offenders of this. But now my boss, when he sends me a message, it's not, hey, I need you to go do this thing. It's, hey, go look at Slack. Can you go check Slack? And then I'll move over to the walled garden area and take it from there. That's part of the authorization. Because I know that for him to send me a Slack message, there's a whole lot of hoops and authentication that he's gone through in order to get to there. And the bad guys, they would have to compromise all of those things, which is significantly harder than sending me an SMS with a spoofed phone number. And so now we will berate our executive team if they try and force their employees to act on an SMS message. That's how we have to address this. And how do you protect those rails, the guardrails? That's where you bring in your heavy factors of authentication, depending on how sensitive the workflow is. So for example, somebody wants to get a password and MFA reset, they're going to have to go through quite a bit of hoops. Ideally, if we've done our jobs right, most of those hoops are transparent to them. But if they need to get their laptop locked, that's actually a much, much lower risk. So I can address that with just a phone call. Because the worst that can happen with that is that I'm up here presenting at SAINTCON and my laptop gets locked because somebody spoofed my phone number and got it. And that is an acceptable risk. So hopefully you guys and everybody have enjoyed this little trip down memory lane. I really like it. I've enjoyed this time with you. But that is just about all the time we have. You don't have any more questions, Jake?
I think that's it for me.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. We've got a few more minutes. We can get questions and answers if you guys would like. And if not, I will take off this rather finicky headpiece and return it to its much, much better owner. Okay. Well, thank you, everybody.
Get